My friends, we find ourselves at a peculiar junction in the cartography of human consciousness, a place where the map of memory no longer corresponds to the territory of reality. And I use that word reality with the greatest hesitation, the deepest skepticism, because what we're confronting here is nothing less than a crack in the cosmic egg, a fissure in the facade of the agreed-upon narrative that we call consensus reality. The phenomenon known as the Mandela Effect, named, ironically, for a memory that never was, presents us with a conundrum that would have delighted the ancient mystery schools and horrified the rationalist philosophers of the Enlightenment in equal measure. How is it possible that thousands, perhaps millions of human beings can share a memory of an event that, according to all available evidence, never occurred? How did so many of us come to remember Nelson Mandela dying in prison in the 1980s when he quite clearly emerged from prison in 1990 and went on to become the president of South Africa? This is not simply a matter of misremembering a date or confusing one historical figure with another. This is something far more unsettling, far more profound. This is the Berenstein Bears. Shock, the moment when you realize that the childhood books you read 1,000 times were actually spelled Berenstain with an A, not an E. Your mind rejects this. Your entire being revolts against this assertion, and yet there it is, staring at you from every book cover, every video recording, every piece of physical evidence. Berenstain, not Berenstein. The unsettling feeling that accompanies these discoveries is not merely cognitive dissonance. It's something deeper, something that touches upon the very foundations of how we construct the self, how we navigate the stream of time, how we distinguish between what is real and what is imagined. Because if our memories, those most intimate, most personal possessions, can be false, shared collectively across millions of minds, then what does that say about the nature of consciousness itself? What does it say about the nature of reality? The defining characteristic of the Mandela Effect is not just that individuals misremember facts. We all do that. Memory is notoriously unreliable, as any cognitive psychologist will tell you. No, what makes the Mandela Effect so extraordinarily strange is that these are shared false memories. Thousands upon thousands of people remember the same wrong thing. They remember Luke, "I am your father," when Darth Vader actually says, "No, I am your father." They remember the Monopoly man having a monocle when he never did. They remember Jiffy peanut butter when it's always been Jif. These are not isolated incidents of personal memory failure. These are collective memory events, and that should give us pause. That should make us wonder whether memory is as private, as individualistic as we've been led to believe. Perhaps memory is not stored solely in the neurons of our individual brains. Perhaps there is something else at work here, some strange attractor in the informational field of human consciousness that allows us to tune into memories that exist in some other dimension of possibility, some parallel track of the ever-branching multiverse. And here we arrive at the uncomfortable question, the one that keeps you up at night once you've truly grasped the implications. What if your memories were never yours to begin with? What if they were always borrowed, always shared, always part of a larger collective hallucination that we call history? Now, before we venture too far down the rabbit hole, before we completely abandon the terra firma of conventional explanation, we must acknowledge what the cognitive scientists and psychologists would tell us. And they would tell us quite reasonably that the Mandela Effect is nothing more than a confluence of well-documented cognitive biases and the peculiar way human memory actually works, which is to say, it doesn't work nearly as well as we think it does. The brain is not a video recorder. It doesn't store memories like files on a hard drive, perfectly preserved and waiting to be retrieved. No. The brain is more like a storyteller, constantly reconstructing the past based on fragments of information, current beliefs, social influences, and pure confabulation. Every time you remember something, you're not accessing the stored recording, you're recreating the memory anew. And in that recreation, errors inevitably creep in. Cognitive biases play an enormous role in memory distortion. There's confirmation bias, where we seek out information that confirms what we already believe and ignore information that contradicts it. If you believe you remember the Berenstein Bears with an E, you'll unconsciously filter your perception to maintain that belief, even in the face of contradictory evidence. There's the misinformation effect, where exposure to incorrect information after an event can alter your memory of that event. If someone tells you they remember the Monopoly man having a monocle, you might suddenly remember it too, even if you never noticed a monocle before. Then there's confabulation, the brain's disturbing tendency to simply make up memories to fill in gaps. This isn't lying, it's something far stranger. The brain abhors ambiguity and uncertainty, so it creates plausible narratives to make sense of incomplete information. You might confuse the Monopoly man with Mr. Peanut, who does have a monocle, and your brain, seeking coherence, merges the two images into a single false memory. And let us not underestimate the powerful influence of social suggestion and collective belief. Humans are extraordinarily social creatures. We are constantly calibrating our beliefs and memories against those of our peer group. When thousands of people on the internet insist they remember something a certain way, there's an unconscious pressure to conform, to agree, to validate the collective memory even if it contradicts your own initial recollection. Urban myths spread not because they're true, but because they're compelling, because they tap into something in our collective psyche. This is the rational explanation, the one that allows us to sleep soundly at night, secure in our materialist worldview. The Mandela Effect is simply a psychological quirk, a bug in the wetware. Nothing to worry about. Memory is fallible. Brains are imperfect information processors, and when you combine millions of imperfect brains with the echo chamber of the internet, you get widespread false memories. Case closed. Mystery solved. But is it? Is it really that simple? Because here's what troubles me about this explanation. It's too neat, too convenient, too eager to dismiss the profound strangeness of what we're experiencing. Yes, memory is fallible. Yes, cognitive biases exist. But does that fully explain the specificity of these shared memories? Does it explain why these particular false memories and not others become so widespread, so consistent across diverse populations who have never communicated with each other? The psychological explanation treats the Mandela Effect as if it's merely an error, a glitch in the system. But what if the glitch is trying to tell us something? What if it's a symptom of something deeper, something that our current scientific paradigm isn't equipped to address? The history of science is filled with phenomena that were initially dismissed as psychological aberrations or measurement errors, only to later be recognized as pointing toward entirely new domains of reality. I'm not suggesting we abandon the insights of cognitive psychology. They're valuable, they're real, and they explain a great deal about how memory functions or malfunctions. But I am suggesting that we remain open to the possibility that something else might also be happening. Something that operates at a level beyond individual psychology. Something that touches upon the collective nature of consciousness and the fundamental structure of reality itself. Let us examine some of the most compelling examples of the Mandela Effect, for in the details lie the clues to the deeper mystery. The Luke, I am your father versus no, I am your father discrepancy is perhaps one of the most culturally pervasive Mandela effects. Star Wars: The Empire Strikes Back specifically is one of the most watched, most quoted, most analyzed films in human history. The revelation of Darth Vader's paternity is arguably the most famous plot twist in cinema. And yet, if you ask people to quote the line, the vast majority will say, Luke, I am your father. They will stake their reputation on it. They will argue vehement that this is what Vader says. But it doesn't. He never has. In the actual film, Vader says, no, I am your father, in response to Luke's accusation that Vader killed his father. The no is crucial to the context of the scene. Without it, the line makes no sense as a response, and yet the collective memory has somehow edited out that word and inserted Luke at the beginning, creating a version that, while more quotable in isolation, never actually existed. How did this happen? How did millions of people who have watched the scene multiple times come to remember it incorrectly in the exact same way? The conventional explanation would be that Luke, "I am your father," is simply a more memorable construction, easier to quote out of context, and that through repetition in popular culture, this misquotation became the dominant version in collective memory. Plausible, certainly, but doesn't it strike you as odd that the misquotation is so universal, so consistent? Then we have the curious case of the monocle man on the Monopoly board, except he doesn't have a monocle and never did. Mr. Monopoly, that rotund capitalist with his top hat and mustache, is remembered by countless people as wearing a monocle. Some people can visualize it clearly, can remember looking at the board as children and seeing that monocle glinting in the light. But examine any Monopoly set from any era and you'll find no monocle. Rich Uncle Pennybags, as he's officially known, has never worn one. The leading explanation is that people are confusing Mr. Monopoly with Mr. Peanut, the Planters mascot, who does indeed wear a monocle, top hat, and carries a cane. The brain, in its efficiency, merges these two similar upper-class character archetypes into a single composite image. This is called source confusion, and it's a well-documented phenomenon in memory research. But here's what fascinates me. Why is the confusion always in one direction? Why don't we find equal numbers of people insisting that Mr. Peanut never had a monocle when he clearly does? The error is unidirectional, always adding the monocle to Mr. Monopoly, never removing it from Mr. Peanut. This asymmetry suggests something more than random memory errors. Other popular examples include the Fruit of the Loom cornucopia controversy. Thousands of people distinctly remember the Fruit of the Loom logo featuring a cornucopia, a horn of plenty overflowing with fruit. They remember seeing it on underwear tags, on advertisements, on clothing throughout their childhood. Some people even remember learning what a cornucopia was from this logo. And yet, according to the company and all available historical evidence, there has never been a cornucopia in the Fruit of the Loom logo. Never. Not once in the brand's entire history. How do we explain this? How do thousands of people develop such a specific false memory, complete with associated learning experiences, learning the word cornucopia from the logo? The psychological explanation would invoke confabulation and source confusion. Perhaps people saw cornucopias in Thanksgiving imagery and their brains associated it with the fruit-themed logo. Possible, yes, but again, the specificity and universality of the false memory give one pause. And we cannot discuss Mandela effects without addressing the Berenstein Bears controversy, which has become almost the canonical example of the phenomenon. For those unfamiliar, the popular children's book series about a family of anthropomorphic bears was created by Stan and Jan Berenstain. That's Berenstain with Aina. But multitudes of people, adults who grew up reading these books, who have vivid memories of their childhood, insist with absolute certainty that the name was spelled Berenstein with an E. This one is particularly powerful because it involves childhood memories, which tend to be emotionally resonant and strongly encoded. People don't just casually misremember, they feel strongly that they're correct. Some have reported experiencing a moment of profound disorientation upon discovering the correct spelling, as if reality itself had shifted beneath their feet. The rational explanation focuses on phonetics and familiarity. Names ending in Stein are far more common than names ending in Stain in English-speaking cultures. Einstein, Frankenstein, etc. The brain might simply default to the more familiar pattern. Additionally, in many regional accents, stain and stain are pronounced identically. So people might have always been hearing Berenstain, but unconsciously spelling it according to the more common stain pattern. Reasonable, yes, but it doesn't quite capture the emotional intensity of the experience, the way people described feeling as if they've slipped between realities, as if something fundamental has changed. This isn't just discovering you misspelled a name, it's discovering that your entire childhood was somehow different. That the world was different, that reality itself is less stable than you believed. And now, my friends, we arrive at the truly mind-bending possibilities, the explanations that strain credulity and yet, in their own strange way, make a kind of sense that the purely psychological explanations don't quite capture. Let us consider the many worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics. That extraordinary implication of the mathematics of quantum theory that suggests reality is constantly branching into parallel universes. Every quantum event, every moment when a particle could go left or right, decay or not, decay creates a split in the universe. In one branch, the particle goes left. In another, it goes right. Both outcomes occur, but in separate, non-communicating realities. If this interpretation is correct, and it's not some fringe theory, but a serious mathematically rigorous interpretation accepted by many physicists, then there are parallel universes right now where the Berenstein Bears with an E are real, where Nelson Mandela did die in prison in the 1980s, where Darth Vader says, "Luke, I am your father." These aren't distant, inaccessible realities. According to quantum theory, they're just as real as this one, separated from us only by the branching of quantum events. Now, here's where it gets interesting. What if the boundaries between these parallel realities are not as impermeable as we think? What if, under certain circumstances, information can leak across the membrane, separating one branch of reality from another? What if consciousness itself is not confined to a single timeline, but somehow exists in a superposition across multiple branches simultaneously? The Mandela Effect, from this perspective, would be a kind of cross-dimensional bleed-through, moments when our consciousness briefly accesses memories from parallel timelines where things happen differently. Perhaps through quantum entanglement at the neurological level, our brains occasionally retrieve memories from the wrong universe memories of events that did happen, just not in this particular branch of the multiverse. This would explain the specificity and consistency of Mandela Effect. These aren't random memory errors, they're memories from coherent alternative timelines. In one branch, it's Berenstain. In another, it's Berenstain. Most of us exist in the Berenstain timeline, but our consciousness occasionally retrieves memories from the Berenstain timeline, creating that uncanny sense of wrongness, that feeling that reality has shifted. It sounds like science fiction, I know, but quantum mechanics itself sounds like science fiction. The Copenhagen interpretation tells us that particles don't have definite properties until they're observed. Quantum entanglement allows particles to instantaneously affect each other across any distance. The observer effect suggests that consciousness plays a fundamental role in collapsing the wave function and determining reality. These are not fringe ideas, these are core principles of our most successful physical theory. If consciousness can collapse wave functions, if observation can determine outcomes at the quantum level, then why couldn't consciousness also navigate between branches of the quantum multiverse? Why couldn't memory, which is ultimately a quantum process occurring in the brain, occasionally access information from parallel timelines? Then there's simulation theory, that contemporary iteration of ancient philosophical questions about the nature of reality. What if our reality is not fundamental, but is instead a programmed construct, a simulation running on some vast computational substrate? From this perspective, the Mandela Effect would be exactly what it appears to be, a glitch in the programming, a bug in the simulation. Think about it. In any complex simulation or computer program, there are glitches, inconsistencies, moments when the code fails to execute perfectly. What if Mandela effects are precisely those moments, instances when the simulation updates itself, patches the code, and in doing so creates inconsistencies in the memory files? The Berenstein Bears update didn't quite propagate correctly through all systems, leaving some consciousness units with memories of the old Berenstain version. This might sound far-fetched, but simulation theory is taken seriously by physicists and philosophers, including figures like Nick Bostrom, who has argued that it's statistically probable we're living in the simulation. If civilization reaches a certain level of technological sophistication, they would be able to run countless ancestor simulations. The number of simulated realities would vastly outnumber the original reality, making it more likely than not that any given reality, including ours, is a simulation. If we are in a simulation, then reality is fundamentally informational, not physical. It's data, code, processing, and data can be edited, updated, patched. The Mandela effect would be evidence of those edits, traces of previous versions of the code lingering in the system like cached files that didn't get properly deleted. Finally, we must consider the observer effect and its potential role in shaping shared experience. Quantum mechanics tells us that observation affects reality at the quantum level. The act of measurement collapses the wave function, determining a particle's state from a cloud of probabilities. If consciousness plays this fundamental role in determining physical reality, then what happens when millions of consciousnesses collectively observe and agree upon reality? Perhaps consensus reality is more fluid, more malleable than we think. Perhaps the collective observation and belief of millions of minds actually shapes what is real. In this framework, the Mandela effect would represent moments when the collective consciousness shifts, when enough people begin to remember things differently that reality itself begins to adjust to match the new collective memory. This sounds mystical, but it's rooted in serious questions about the relationship between consciousness and physical reality. If the observer effect is real at the quantum level, and if quantum effects scale up to the macro level in complex systems like brains, then collective consciousness might indeed have reality-shaping power. The Mandela effect would be evidence of that power. Moments when the collective mind is literally rewriting history, changing the past to match present belief. And so we find ourselves confronting a question that strikes at the very heart of what it means to be a conscious being, navigating through time. What are the implications for our perception of truth when memory itself cannot be trusted? You see, we build our entire sense of self on the foundation of memory. You are, in a very real sense, the sum total of your memory, your childhood experiences, your relationships, your triumphs and failures. These memories are the threads that weave together the narrative you call your life. Take away reliable memory, and what are you? Who are you? The Mandela effect challenges us to confront this uncomfortable truth. Our memories are not reliable. They never have been. Whether explained by psychology, quantum mechanics, simulation theory, or something else entirely, the phenomenon demonstrates that memory is far more fluid, far more vulnerable to alteration than we'd like to believe. This has profound implications for how we understand truth itself. In a court of law, eyewitness testimony is treated with skepticism because we know memory is fallible. The Mandela effect suggests something even more disturbing, not just that individual memories are unreliable, but that collective memory, the shared sense of history that binds a culture together, might also be unreliable. If thousands of people can share a false memory, then how do we distinguish between true history and collective hallucination? How do we know that the correct version of events is actually correct, and not simply the version that the majority currently believes? Perhaps history itself is not a fixed record of past events, but a negotiated fiction, constantly being revised by the collective consciousness. This is deeply unsettling because it means reality is far less stable than we pretend. We navigate our lives with the assumption that the past is fixed, that what happened happened, that memory, while imperfect generally, points us toward truth. But what if that's wrong? What if the past is as fluid as the future, constantly shifting beneath our feet as quantum timelines merge and diverge, as the simulation updates itself, as collective consciousness reshapes reality? The Mandela Effect challenges our understanding of memory and reality in ways that are both terrifying and exhilarating. Terrifying because it undermines the foundations of certainty, the belief that there are objective facts we can know and trust. Exhilarating because it suggests reality is far stranger, far more mysterious than the materialist worldview allows. It hints at dimensions of existence beyond the physical, at the power of consciousness to shape reality, at the possibility that we're living in a quantum multiverse or a sophisticated simulation. What should we do with this knowledge? How should we navigate a reality where even our most trusted memories might be false? First, I think we must cultivate epistemic humility, a recognition that our grip on truth is far more tenuous than we'd like to admit. This doesn't mean descending into relativism or giving up on the pursuit of knowledge. It means approaching our beliefs with a lighter touch, being willing to question even those things we feel most certain about, remaining open to the possibility that we might be wrong. Second, we must become more sophisticated consumers of information and memory. We need to understand the cognitive biases that affect our thinking, the ways memory can be manipulated and distorted. We need to seek out primary sources, corroborating evidence, and multiple perspectives rather than trusting our gut or relying on what everyone knows. Third, and perhaps most importantly, we must learn to sit with uncertainty, to tolerate the discomfort of not knowing, of existing in a reality where the ground beneath our feet is less solid than we'd hoped. This is not easy for the human mind, which craves certainty and coherence, but it may be the most honest response to the actual nature of reality as revealed by both modern science and phenomena like the Mandela Effect. The Mandela Effect invites us to consider that perhaps the ancients were right, that perhaps the mystics and shamans who spoke of reality as illusion, as Maya, as a dream by a cosmic dreamer, or onto something profound. Perhaps the solid, objective, material world we think we inhabit is far more mysterious, far more fluid, far more responsive to consciousness than the scientific establishment has been willing to admit. I want to leave you with this thought. What if the Mandela Effect is not a problem to be solved, but a doorway to be explored? What if it's an invitation to expand our understanding of consciousness, memory, and reality? What if these glitches in the matrix are actually cracks through which we can glimpse the deeper nature of existence? I encourage you to share your most baffling Mandela Effect experience, not because I want to collect data or prove a theory, but because there's something profound in the sharing of these experiences. When you articulate that moment of cognitive dissonance, that instant when you realized your memory doesn't match consensus reality, you're participating in a collective exploration of consciousness itself. Perhaps what we're experiencing is the universe becoming self-aware through us, consciousness recognizing its own strange loops and paradoxes. Perhaps we're living through a phase transition in human awareness, a moment when the old certainties dissolve and new possibilities emerge. The Mandela Effect reminds us that we are not passive observers of a fixed reality, but active participants in a reality that is constantly being created, destroyed, and recreated. Your memories, your observations, your consciousness itself plays a role in shaping what is real. That's not a comforting thought for those who want certainty, but it's an empowering thought for those who are ready to accept the radical responsibility that comes with being conscious beings in a quantum universe. So I ask you, what if your memories were never yours to begin with? What if they're borrowed from parallel timelines, programmed into the simulation, or co-created by collective consciousness? And more importantly, what will you do with that knowledge? Will you retreat into the comfortable fiction of certainty, or will you step through the looking glass into a reality far stranger and more wondrous than you ever imagined? The choice, as always, is yours. But the glitch has been revealed. The crack in consensus reality has been exposed, and once you've seen it, you can never unsee it. Welcome to the mystery, my friends. Welcome to the real.